since 6 a.m.?
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Aha.
That's the one.
So how about we put the political stories into perspective, shall we? And we'll begin with the election dilemma. There was a story that was filed by Kevin Washira, where the forthcoming repeat presidential polls have been termed by political pundits as a curtain raiser for succession politics, both at Jubilee and NASA camps. But that will only happen if the elections are held on the 26th of this month, as scheduled by IEBC and opposed by the NASA coalition. Kevin Washira puts into perspective the possible political crisis facing the country 18 days to the poll rerun. Let's take a look at that story. We'll be right back.
The race to consolidate votes continues as frontrunners gain momentum. Less than 20 days to the fresh presidential elections, Jubilee Party members are vigorously campaigning for re-election of President Uhuru Kenyatta, whose win was nullified by the Supreme Court, and have even sponsored a bill to review electoral laws. NASA, on the other hand, organizing protests clamoring for reforms in the electoral agency IEBC, even as they oppose electoral law amendments, threatening to boycott the rerun if their demands are not met.
Wao ndio wanataka kuhujumu sheria. Ile sheria wanataka kupitisha katika bunge ni kinyume ya katiba yetu. Nyinyi mko na responsibility kutetea katiba. If the government tries to overturn the constitution, the people of Kenya have got a right to rise up against that government.
Article 138 of the Constitution states a presidential election must be held in all the 290 constituencies. Some of political commentators interpret the boycott threats being made by NASA flag bearer Raila Odinga as a possible tactic for stalling elections.
In NASA stronghold, there's a possibility that massive violence might be used to stop elections in one polling station of that one constituency. Will that be the reason as to why Raila Odinga is saying that elections will not be conducted? If that is the line that he wants to do, the government still controls the monopoly of violence in terms of the police, in terms of the military, in terms of all relevant security forces.
This is perhaps the reason Jubilee Party is proposing that in a presidential contest between two candidates, if one pulls out of the race, the other shall be declared president. Political analyst and constitutional lawyer Dunstan Omari says a selection of president instead of an election through a competitive process would injure the legitimacy of the presidency, especially in the eyes of international community.
If Uhuru Kenyatta does not get an opposition candidate to contest with, the legitimacy and the international recognition of the president of Kenya becomes suspect. He will be seen to have been a president only elected by Jubilee. And in my own view, I think Raila Odinga wants to put Uhuru Kenyatta in that situation, that I will not be in the ballot. Then you will only run yourself.
NASA leaders, well aware of this, are on the ground raiding their supporters to reject an election conducted by the same IEBC officials who conducted the disputed August 8th general elections.
We are going to ensure, I know we have our own brothers and sisters here who are looking for jobs at IEBC. If we say there is no elections, don't make a mistake of carrying that box from Sori to any polling station in Nyatike. I'll take it upon myself to ensure that you get the punishment you deserve.
No elections with Njoroge in that office. We are not going to relent. We are going to make sure it happens.
But in case the rerun is held on 26th of October, as planned by the IEBC, a section of political pundits and pollsters predict a landslide win for President Uhuru Kenyatta, whose campaign has been boosted by defection of politicians who lost in NASA strongholds. Kevin Washira, Channel One News.
Thank you so much, Kevin Washira, for that report. And I'd like to begin with you, Millie. When we talk of a possible political crisis let's put that particular phrase into context. What are we looking at, given the circumstances the nation is facing right now?
I think that one of the things we need to wake up and be truthful to is the fact that we are first and foremost unlikely to have an election come the 26th. An election that would have been conducted in accordance to the Constitution and to the laws. And I say this why? Because we have 17 days to go to the elections. We are seeing Chebukati coming up with this team. The team that he's coming up with has, of course, been put in place prior to Chiloba being sidelined, which means that already whatever they're coming to do is to simply implement. There's no real policy direction that they're going to give. There's no real guidance to the process they're coming to give. It is just simply to execute the systems and the plans that have already been put into place. Therefore, it would not need any rocket scientist to come and say that he's setting up this team at this stage does not amount to getting Chiloba or anybody else who had been responsible for the fiasco of 8 August taken out of the scenario. 2, tomorrow we have Parliament going to discuss the amendments to the election laws that they have been having public views being received in the course of last week. Now, we know that including some of the people, a number of people declined to present themselves before that committee, saying that that would be tantamount to giving it legitimacy. We know that there are those who presented themselves and in presenting themselves stated that they felt it was improper to have that process continue. We don't know to what extent that committee is going to take that into account, but it was stated, it was covered, it was live, we all saw it, that the parties did tell them that we think that this is not the correct procedure for us to be going towards amending of the laws. Now, therefore, we know Kenyans, chances are that tomorrow, should the process then proceed, because you can't go to court before the process in Parliament has culminated, that there will be a number of Kenyans popping up with applications all over the country in different courts, trying to deal with the issue of these laws, which will mean that Chebukati will have to pause, like any rightful policymaker would, to wait for the outcome of this court process for him to determine what next, which leaves him with how many days? We're already at 17 as we speak today. Tomorrow, by the time Parliament is moving, we'll be going to, by the time people are moving to court, we'll be going to less than 10 days. So seriously, we need to wake up and smell the coffee and see that it won't happen. Secondly, we remember that, or I think this is thirdly, not secondly now, we remember that the Supreme Court did say that the election was to be conducted according to the Constitution and the laws. Now, I know that including the DPP has currently directed that Raila and other candidates from the NASA side should be investigated for saying there would be no election. We know that there have been theories that have been presented here, including by my colleague, Omari, who is not here today, about the possibility of elections being stopped in certain constituencies. But let us just use the simple common man's analogy of what would happen. You have a football match. You have got people who have won all the way to the semi-finals. You have this finals match. At the finals, there's a dispute as to who is the winner. Then you're told, can you have a repeat match? Now, if you're told to have a repeat match for that particular tournament, for you to be able to determine that that tournament concluded and there was a winner, then the persons going back to play must be the same. That is one. 2, the rules must have been clearly agreed to and adhered to. If not, then you will say that tournament never completed. You will say that tournament never concluded. It's as simple as that. So if then the 2 key people who are supposed to go and repeat the finals were not there, how then would you say that that tournament concluded? So there are many different ways to look at it without even bringing the violence angle into it, that there may be violence. There are many other ways that you can be able to determine whether legally you would say that that tournament concluded or did not, as far as the presidential election is concerned. So then, will we then, by the 26th, have had an election that we can say as Kenyans, a proudly democratic society, that we have had a process where we have identified a leader using our channels. Even in 2013, we had issues. We had issues, but we went to court and it culminated there. And we were happy to move on as a country and say, listen, we had problems, but the court determined, and this is the way the country is moving. This time we went to court and the court has determined. And if the process does not culminate properly so that we can say that that process produced a candidate, can we then say that the process has culminated? It will not have culminated. So you can just see one fiasco after another. And I think that at this stage, unfortunately, it's a very painful statement for me to make as a lawyer, but lawyers are not going to help the situation because they keep having their own interpretations. What we need is leadership. We don't need just the leaders that we have, but we need Kenyans who will come out and be leaders and realize that things are wrong and be able to say to the face of the either side, where you're wrong, you're wrong. It doesn't always have to be a case of balancing, that you say, okay, Jubilee, you're wrong in 2-3, NASA, you're wrong in 2-3, so that it's balanced. It's about saying, this is wrong, let's move ahead. This is wrong, let's move ahead. So that we look at what is wrong and get this country to sit and determine. Now, the next question that all lawyers, including myself, will ask, under what framework will this happen? And you look at the Constitution, which established in one of the schedules a constitutional oversight committee that is supposed to, including other things, give guidance at times when there's a problem towards implementation of this constitution. So we have systems that we can try to bring through, and this committee can be able to seek guidance from leaders. I'm not just talking about the political leaders, but I'm talking about someone who can come out and give leadership and talk sense to this nation at this time.
At this time. Martin, of course, as Millie rightfully put it, tomorrow we expect the amendments to be discussed in Parliament. But so far, how has this conversation shaped up in as far as these amendments are concerned?
In terms of the amendments and what we have seen, Samuel, and my own understanding of those amendments is there's a reason why I came to realize my own interpretation, that there's a reason why NASA has not named its leadership in some of those committees, in fact, in parliamentary committees. And I want to believe it's a tactful move that was meant to ensure that whatever happens, let it happen in our absence, so that at the end of the day, when this matter finds itself in the court like it will, then we are going to argue and challenge the legality of whatever is happening. So I want to agree totally with Millie that this country has become extremely so litigious. And what you want to expect is once Parliament passes those particular amendments, say into law, what you'll expect is a number of litigants heading to the court and saying, challenging the legality of these particular amendments. And what is the likelihood that the court will pronounce them as illegal? It's very high, that they're going to be pronounced as illegal. And so what does that then leave the country in terms of electoral preparedness? I'm one of the people who believe that it's unlikely we'll have elections on October 26th. I want to agree, my own view will have been that Chebukati, under his leadership, he should have looked for President Uhuru Kenyatta and NASA leader Raila Odinga in the absence of all these other parties, other players, because these are the key guys who are likely to, show us or give us direction as a country. So I wish they just went somewhere, be it Sagana, be it Naivasha, even if they went to Spain, I don't have a problem.
France,
then maybe. Sit down and then discuss, because what I see is a situation where we are talking at each other, not to each other. And what baffles me is you look at some of the interpretations the politicians will give you, some outright lies, because they want to defend the master. But Saitoto said there comes a time when the country is bigger than our own interests. And I think that's where we need to.
When you look at the election amendment laws, and no, they're not yet laws, they're just amendments for now. Does it make you sort of remember the amendments to the Security Act? And what transpired therein?
There's a correlation between
The two.
Yeah, between the two. In fact, my own hunch tells me whatever the consequences of the amendment to the security laws suffered is likely to be the situation now. In fact, this is going to be more catastrophic. But you see, what we need to do as a country is legislate for posterity. There's going to come a time when Jubilee will be in power, and there's going to come a time when another regime will be in power. So you need to ask yourself, what happens if you're not in power? Because when you legislate to, fulfill your own selfish interest at that time, there's going to reach a time when the same laws you passed are going to haunt you.
Exactly.
So what you need to do is legislate for posterity, not for this, selfish interest that sometimes we want to put in front of the interest of the country.
Over to you, Millie.
Thanks. And just to add on to that, other than legislating for posterity, you're also legislating for the nation. We saw civil society organizations from other parts of the country come up over the weekend and say, seriously, consultations based in Nairobi? Is it only Nairobi that is concerned with amendments to the election laws? We did not see the select committee go around the country. We did not see different organizations being facilitated to even come to Nairobi to be able to present their views, so that this would be a reflection of what the entire nation feels, not just Nairobi, because that amounts to, and we've been very keen as a nation, post the 2010 constitution coming into effect, that we treat all counties equally, regardless of size, regardless of whether you're number 1 in the list or number 47. And here is a stage where it seems like we are putting Nairobi County ahead of all the other counties, because the other counties were not given a chance. So you can see that there's already quite a number of concerns that are being called to face by the different actors who would be affected by these laws. We saw IEBC itself state that they did not think that they needed new laws right now for them to be able to amend. We know that all the amendments that have been made to the election process prior to this, IEBC has been very central. They have been in Mombasa with the legal committee for 2 weeks, just sitting and cracking their heads over these amendments, because they are the implementers, they are the experts. They're the ones who should come and give guidance to the committee. Most of the times, they're the ones who are pushing for certain amendments that they require. Here was a case where they were being invited by other people who felt that we need amendments, not the experts themselves. So that already also by itself raises another concern. We saw the way the chairman of IEBC was treated by the committee when he appeared before there. We know that there were 2 other independent commissions that presented themselves before that committee. There was the anti-corruption and the human rights. We did not see them being subjected to the same questions that the IEBC commission was being subjected to. So why is IEBC being treated differently, yet they are the experts in this process? So there are very many questions.
There are 2 statements actually that as a nation we need to get exactly what they mean, and I know one of it has gone to the Director of Public Prosecutions, and that is when you talk of there will be no election, okay, and boycotting an election. What exactly does that mean? What should the common mwananchi read from that statement?
I think that one of the things that should come to mind immediately is, if something did not happen according to the law, then it did not happen. And this is not just peculiar to elections. We see that even marriages are annulled. If you purport to have married somebody and you have not completed the marriage as it's supposed to have.
The process. The legalities and the regularities.
Exactly. In the process, there's divorce, which is different, but there's annulment of a marriage where you say this was just wrong. It cannot happen. These are first cousins. These are brother and sister. It cannot happen according to the law. So the law will cancel it, and it will not be that you're a divorcee, but it will be that you have never been married. It never happened. So it is the same thing that we are saying now. If this election is not done according to the law, then will it have been an election? That is a question that we as Kenyans must continue to ask ourselves, particularly now that we know election is not just about going to vote. It is about being enabled to attend and vote. And I tell you that particularly persons with disabilities will tell you that is a very key factor for them. They often ask, I remember them asking even before we went to vote, they were saying, when you go and you hang those tables high up there, and I am struggling down here because I'm not able-bodied, are you telling me that I'm participating fully? Have you cared to ensure that I'll also be able to put in my ballot like any other Kenyan with dignity? So there are processes, there are things that you need to think about for all the persons so that the ground is fair and we all participate fully. If that does not happen, then there's no election. You cannot say that there's an election. And there are different ways to look at how that can fail.
And before you even come in, Martin, just a bit, merely boycott an election for either candidate. If should they decide to boycott, legally, what does that mean? Are there any repercussions?
Well, boycotting, nobody forces you to present yourself to an election. If you decide, like we had one person who was gazetted before the rest were gazetted in August 8th, because he had no opposition. We had one person last time, I think when there was a by-election, if I'm not wrong, and he came in, Moses Kuria, he came in with no competitor. Not because people had boycotted, but because there was no competitor. If you present yourself as a competitor, and then subsequently you decide in your own volition that you're not going to attend that election, if you go and you try to sabotage that election because of your own selfish interest, that is different. Because then the processes will have been adhered to, the law will have been adhered to, and you will be trying to circumvent the whole process for your own personal gains. And as they normally say in court, that you cannot come to court with dirty hands and expect justice, then you'd be coming to court with dirty hands. But if you have constantly and consistently asked for a fair playing ground, if you have constantly and consistently asked for systems to be put in place in a certain manner, and that is not seen to be done, and any independent person looking at it does not see it to be done. Let me give an example. Now Chebukati says that he has unveiled the team. Now, does that team that he has unveiled, looking at it as an independent person outside NASA, outside Jubilee, would you be able to say truthfully that, and remember justice is the blindfolded woman with the two scales, would you be able to say truthfully that he addressed the concerns that had been raised before? This is barely 2 weeks to go. Every process, it's all systems go. The same commission has consistently come out to tell us we are ready. We are ready and everything has been put in place. By who? By Chiloba and his team. So now after Chiloba and his team have put things in place, then you come. Would you be able to say that? That's a question that a Kenyan should ask themselves as they think whether Chebukati is presenting a level playing field and is addressing the issues that cost us our money.
In fact, as she talks about the team, the team that was unveiled by Chebukati, one Chebukati said, because this is the second time Chebukati is doing this. The last time he unveiled this team, there was some degree of opposition, even among the commissioners themselves. They went to Naivasha, and Bishop Alfred Rotich, among others, went and gave them some pep talk and to try and sort out the issues. But I remember Raphael Tuju, Jubilee Party Secretary General, having, or Jubilee Party as it were, having very grave issues with the team. In fact, their own argument was some of the proposed members who were the caretaker team, some sort of, that they have taken positions, politically speaking, and therefore they cannot trust them to manage an election. So what I'm expecting is it's Jubilee Party that should be coming out to say, listen, we opposed this team the last time you unveiled it. You're now coming to unveil it. We still oppose it. Failure to which, if Jubilee now becomes comfortable that we now have confidence in this team, then as a person who has some intellect, will start asking themselves, what makes them now so comfortable with this team that they opposed a few weeks ago? That should be the question. Number two, We know the problem has been around Chiloba, Betty Nyabuto, among others. 2 of them have since left, I think. James Mwanje was suspended. But then when you unveil a team, and as a communicator, you don't tell us what is the consequence, where are the other people? For example, what will be the role of Chiloba in this election? What will be the role of Immaculate Kasait in this election? If you do not communicate so that we get to understand what is it, you know, it's one thing unveiling a team, but working under the very same people that one wing of the coalition has a problem with. So I think for me, I have a lot of issues in terms of how IBC then communicates, that Chebukati is not communicating. I've said before on this particular platform that what if I was IBC, I would have set aside 2 days or 1 day. Press conferences, the media in this country is looking for news. So if you just say that every Wednesday I'm going to be having a press conference to update the country, ask your questions, let us respond to the questions, you know, you let Kenyans follow the process so that some of those gray areas you know, are kind of illuminated by everybody who is following the process. But I saw the other day one NASA, you know, supporter or official for that matter, asking the question, when you tell us you have unveiled the team and you are silent on the other side of what's the fate of Chiloba, that's pure hogwash. You are simply playing to public gallery. And those are the issues I think we must address as a country moving forward.
We expect the Supreme Court to give direction on Chebukati's point of clarification about the reconciliation of the tally. And there is one statement that was used that Form 34A, Form 34B may not necessarily reflect a total tally of Form 34A. Where could the disconnect be? Why should one form not tally with the other if the process is continuous? In basic sense, what is Chebukati looking for?
Before Millie answers that question, Samuel, maybe I can respond to it. When I saw Chebukati go to the Supreme Court to seek clarification over that move, I was worried. Worried because he simply confirmed to me that he managed the August 8th election without knowing what he was doing. In my view then, it means that before August 8th election, Chebukati should have gone to the Supreme Court to seek an interpretation of the appellate, the ruling by the appellate court that clarified those issues. And I remember sitting here, and the judgment was issued from around 9 or 10 all the way to around 4. My understanding of the Court of Appeal ruling was that Form 34A being the primary document, whatever you enter in Form 34B should be a reflection of Form 34A.
Should be a total tally.
Yes.
Should be a total tally.
Yes. So that when you are going to say that you want to verify, you are simply saying that the figure that is in Form 34B is a reflection of Form 34A, and so I verify that this is a true reflection of what happened at the polling station or polling center. And therefore, if there are any cases of discrepancy, that you have 40,000 in Form 34A, and Form 34B reads 50,000, then my understanding of the Court of Appeal ruling should be such a situation should be addressed in a court of law.
Exactly, and it should be at that, because remember this constituency level, with courts being present in all those places that can deal with those issues. If Chebukati cannot amend, and he should not amend.
He should not amend.
He should not amend anything that comes to him, but he must ask questions. And if he's not going to ask questions and confirm that everything is in accordance to the law, then what is the point of having him there as the returning officer, as the person with those powers that we have given him? Now, if he sees that there's a discrepancy and it doesn't tally up, it should be responded to at that level. And should be dealt with at that level. So that at that level you can go to the court, ask the court to reopen those ballots, have the people in that constituency dealing with that, and clarify it, and he can wait. That is why he has even 7 days. Under certificate of urgency, he can say that from constituency number 62, we are still waiting for this because there was an issue that needs to be clarified and I need to get clean things.
I don't know whether I had my own, and I'd like to take up a layman's gear on this one, totally.
Yes.
would there be a situation whereby, because the law is such that this is a process, one culminates to the other, culminates to the other.
Yes.
Explain to me how a total tally of Form 34A does not equal to Form 34B. How can that happen?
It cannot, and it should not happen.
It cannot and it should not happen.
Yes.
So what is Chebukati looking for?
You see,
Make me understand what he's looking for.
Samuel, I think, and that's why I tell you, when I looked at Chebukati move to the Supreme Court, I was so pissed off, to say the least. What Chebukati is looking for is, because remember that we have transmission of those results. You have the text and the image.
Yes.
You have already transmitted it. We know of situations in the past where there were claims of returning officers disappearing, and Kivuitu did indicate that sometimes back at KICC during those confrontations. I cannot trace my officers, but you are waiting for results. So to cure those problems, that's when the transmission of these results came. So Chebukati should know that whatever is in Form 34A should tally with Form 34B. But we have cases where people are so mischievous, so that you have Form 34A reading 40,000, and this can be in Nyanza, and it can be in Kisumu, it can be in Kirinyaga, it can be in Mombasa, where you get 40,000 votes, recorded in Form 34A, well indicated 40,000 votes, but Form 34B reads 80,000 votes. There's a possibility. And that's where the chairman of the commission has been given powers to verify, not to vary those results, to verify. Because then you cannot tell if Form 34A, the primary document, is saying from 40,000 votes, and Form 34B is saying 80,000 votes, your suspicion should be something was done on Form 34B. And that's where Amelie says, now you seek, if it means a certificate of urgency, you go to the courts and say there's a problem here. If it means reopening those ballot boxes, let's do so. And this is something I thought that Chebukati should have been privy to as we went to the polls. But it will appear that he was not, and therefore there's a likelihood that, anyway, some of the Form 34As were not there according to the Supreme Court. So yeah, he may have just gone with Form 34B. You can easily tell the confusion. And in fact, I saw one of the media houses call it Chebukati confusion. And I think for me, it's total confusion.
And that is why, if you recall, at the time when they were reading the court's decision, the DCJ did mention, and she said, even if we are to assume that we are adopting your interpretation of the law, IEBC, that you said you have no concern with 34As and your focus is on 34Bs, then the least you should have done, and I remember the DCJ actually reading an imagined statement that the returning officer in the presidential election should then have read to the country as he delivered those results, saying, this is what I have from 34Bs. When you verify them, whoever feels they have the time and the energy to verify them with the 34As, that if you find a discrepancy, you can go to court. That was what the court had told them then. So it's quite interesting, to say the least, that now we would still be having that coming up as a matter of concern that should be presented before the court for interpretation. This is simply because people want to complicate, in my opinion, processes beyond what is. It's so simple. You're told 34A. At each polling station, they have the 34As. These are then transferred to the constituency level. You will get the 34B. The 34B will be a total. If you're doing it, you would have a quick zipped file. For each of the 291 constituencies, you'd have a zipped file with the 34As of all the different polling stations that were there in that particular constituency level. As simple as that. And when you open it and look at it, it should equal what is in 34B. If you open it and look at it, because that is why you are put there with all the powers, and that is why we pay you good money and give you protection, and your office is protected. And in fact, part of the amendments were interfering an analysis with the independence of an independent commission. And the Constitution has clearly outlined that when you're going to interfere with the independence of a certain commission or an independent body, then it must be by way of a referendum. So there are all these questions that we have. So all those powers we've given Chebukati is for him to then be able to look and see, okay, if it doesn't add up, deal with it there. Bring me what has added up. It is like what the court told us. It is not for us to determine for you who has won or to determine who has not won. It is for IEBC to conduct elections and come and show us. And if we ask a question, just respond in a manner that we are able to understand.
Right.
Yes.
That's, I feel like the issues around this election are both macro and micro, but I think the micro is on a macro scale. Maybe we should have PLO come and explain to us what he was arguing out about Menemes and something about the little things. The little things. But then moving forward, because it is critical for this nation to move on.
Yes.
And the question in every person's mind right now is, what will it take for this nation to move on from this?
What it will take for this nation to move out from this is, it's a fact that we have a fresh presidential election as ordered by the court. Whether it will be on 26th, whether it will be on 1st November, because remember the 60 days lapses on 1st of November. And Mele will tell you then the lacuna comes in. NASA will be reading the law from their own side, Jubilee read from their own side. The beauty with the law is that everybody has his own interpretation. In fact, I dare say that if we gave Jubilee and NASA the Bible so that they start interpreting the book of Judges 4, they'll have their own interpretation. Gideon did not do this.
Amen.
Gideon did this. So, but my take, Samuel, on a very serious note is, I think the future of this country is in IEBC. It lies at the doorstep of Chebukati. The Supreme Court that we have is simply telling you that the end does not justify the means justifies the end. And that tells you that Chebukati has no room to blunder. He has to get it right. From the polling station, from the scanning of those images, I'm interpreting it in terms of the existing law, not the amendments, because I'm one of the people who believe the amendments will not apply in this election because of the litigious nature of Kenyans. So I'm saying that Chebukati should get it right. In terms of Form 34A, Form 34B, those figures should tally. Those images, the text is sent with the image, so that by the time they're going to the constituency level, he has the results here. And that he can, so that if it's President Uhuru Kenyatta who has won, or it's Raila Odinga, you can validate, you can verify that indeed, from this particular polling station, these were the number of votes. Even if we opened the ballot boxes, this is what you're going to get, or we opened the server for that matter, this is what you're going to get, and there's no room for any blunder. The Supreme Court, the majority decision was very clear. Make the same blunders, you bring them here for an appeal, we'll still nullify the election. So we are likely, like one was joking, Christmas is likely to eat us. We are not going to eat Christmas if we do not get it right. But this is a more serious issue, Samuel, that for me, Chebukati has no room to blunder. We must get it right as a country.
You're saying that it's a joke that Christmas is going to eat people. You've seen the number of cars that are being tolled because of defaulting and everything.
Yes.
Times are hard.
We can now not pay the loans.
It is true that times are hard. But merely coming over to you, as Martin says, we all look up to IEBC.
And God.
And God above all.
Of course.
But we do look up to IEBC to give and to give the leadership that you were talking about earlier. But from as Wanjiko, right? What should be our preparation? What should we prepare ourselves, or what should we consider as we prepare to move away from this situation?
I think that what needs to be taken into account in our day-to-day life is that we must find a framework that will bring sensible people who are not going to be bogged on addressing things in a limited manner, but for posterity. Kenya needs to move on. We are at a point where we need to find a solution. We must never, the economists need to come out and tell us the cost that this has had to us as a nation up to today, leave alone what we're being told, GPD dropping and what, but the total costs, even before we went, because right from last year, we were already in election mode. If they could come and tell us so that then we can sit up and smell the coffee and realize that we just must get it right and sort out this thing. And it has to be us Kenyans. If you look at in the past, right from 1997, there are clips going around now of Charity Ngilu and Mwai Kibaki complaining about these international observers, you know, in 1997 and what they have done. We have had people come in. We know that they come in largely driven by their own, protecting their own interests first before promoting ours, which then becomes secondary. Therefore, it must be us Kenyans coming up to take the leadership and moving the country forward so that we stop being focused on these presidential elections. There must be a president. There must be a president. And for me, my understanding is that under the Constitution, it's clearly provided that there's a president who must hand over once a democratically designed process has concluded. So we can have a president until we determine this process. Now, the nature of that presidency is what is not clear. And that can be determined by way of discussions. What kind of presidency would that be? What would it entail for us to be able to move this country forward? So that Kenyans can stop, life can continue to move forward as we allow these processes to take their full completion. It is nothing that requires people who will come with their hard stance. Remember, there are certain MPs who would like things to stay in a certain way. They have seats to protect. Remember, there are certain people, MPs sitting, who are already seeing their mathematics falling into place for 2022 when they're going to become governors. We have certain senators, we have people with their own selfish interests behind there. But we have two people who definitely have the love of majority of Kenyans, and that is Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and Raila Amolo Odinga. And the two of them are unlikely to have any other role with the political scenario post this election. Therefore, they have everything to gain by ensuring that this process culminates in something beautiful for Kenyans. Otherwise, I see us going the South Sudan way very soon.
Let me also ask.
In fact, Samuel, as you ask, you know, the other day as I sat and thought about this country, I began asking myself fundamental questions. You know, we passed the Constitution in 2010, and one of the reasons, the import of a devolved system of governance was to try and, you know, diffuse power, so that the obsession with the presidency perhaps goes away and we go back and, you know, we are working with the counties. That seems not to have worked so far. Hope in the future it will. But I think we need to start asking ourselves a fundamental question. Is it time we went back and looked at the model of democracy that we have, especially when it comes to this thing called first past the post principle, the winner takes it all? Perhaps in my view, it was wrong to do away with the position of Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Ministers for that matter. I will have a situation where and many countries, many democracies are going back and asking themselves, do we need this kind of principle where the winner takes it all? And so a situation where you have Dida winning the presidency and number two now takes over the prime minister, and you know, you move forward as a country. I think we need to go back and start asking ourselves those questions. Is this kind of principle working for this country? And my answer is no, it's not. Perhaps if you have a situation where you win the presidency and the other person is also given some share because of the number of votes he got and all those kind of things, who knows, it might just work for this country.
Millie, the Supreme Court did say that election to be held within the next 60 days, and that is law.
Yes.
Anyway, that is law. In the event 60 days lapse and we don't have an election, what does that mean?
It means that we have a situation. I don't want to use the term crisis because then many people start popping up saying, what crisis? But we do have a situation because then we will not have concluded the process of identifying a president for the republic as is by law required, and we will not have concluded it for justifiable reasons. If Chebukati can be truthful and tell us that, because he is the one who knows. He keeps coming up telling us reassurances that we are ready, that all systems go. He did that August 8th, but it turned out what? That they were actually not ready, that they had not even interpreted how he's supposed to read those forms, where the power of the returning officer has been shared at various levels, so that he determines, let the person exercise their power. I won't interfere with it. At constituency, make sure you get it right, bring it to me. At the next level, make sure you get it right, bring it to me. Then I will read it. He did not even interpret that right. Now, at this time, he keeps on reassuring us that he has done it. And we don't see it reflecting in what we see presenting from IEBC. Therefore, then, we will not have had an election. So we need to stop. Again, like I've said, the Constitution says you have a president. The president will be in office until he hands over to a democratically elected president. The process of how that democratically elected president will need to be determined. We have a clause within the schedule that says this Constitutional Oversight Committee, Special Select Committee of Parliament, would be able to ensure that any problems that arise in the process of interpreting or implementing the Constitution are addressed. They should be able to give guidance through some system or some process that would be able to discuss and give this country a clear way forward. I think it would be very, very foolhardy of us as a nation to go into an election where we are going to throw down the drain. We look like, if you can give an example of a house of somebody who's very poor, and he throws out a whole sack of rice, and then tomorrow you give him and he's throwing out the whole sack of rice and coming back to beg from you again. We are constantly begging for aid, we are begging for money, and here we are wasting money in processes that we know are going to lead us to no place.
So bottom line, there will be no lacuna with the presidency.
I think there will be no lacuna.
Article 142 stands.
What the lacuna will be is what kind of presidency is it? Because that is not determined. Yes.
And the law is silent on it.
It's, as far as I can read, it is silent on it.
So it becomes a lacuna.
Yes.
If it is silent, it becomes a lacuna.
Okay.
But what he did not also tell you is that the law also envisages a situation where the Speaker of the Parliament can take over.
Well,
Yes.
those are instances of designated survivor. I think we need to separate the two. Those are instances purely of designated survivor,
Yes.
which I think are very different from what we're discussing
Yes.
this morning.
Yes, I appreciate it. I just wanted to jog your mind.
But you know what, ladies and gentlemen, before we bring Iron Politics to a close, let's take a look at Mombasa. And I'd like to take this story that was done by Curia, and where former Mombasa Senator Hassan Omar and a host of NASA politicians from the coast region have decamped to Jubilee Party to support President Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election bid. Former Taita Taveta Governor John Mrutu and Likoni Wiper aspirant Suleiman Shakombo pledged to campaign vigorously for the president, accusing the opposition leadership of a stifling development in the coast region. Before we even cross over to the story, Millie, your take on this particular decamping. Number one, does it add any value? Should NASA be concerned that it's losing out, or should Jubilee celebrate that it's adding up?
Well, there are two ways to look at it. Of course, NASA should be concerned that a person who has been focal, he's been a Secretary General of one of the key partners within that coalition until his resignation. Therefore, he had a key role to play as a leader, giving guidance to the coalition, that he has now moved. But then their secondary concern would be, as he moved alone or as he moved with people. We know they were supposed to have a rally on the ground, which did not happen.
Did not take off.
If we saw them present on the ground, they would be able to know to what extent Hassan Omar has moved with the people or he has moved alone. Now, the other angle of it is it then Hassan Omar as an individual becomes a headache to who? It is a headache to Jubilee to deal. They have all these leaders, in quotes, who come and say they're representing the interests of the people, and they all have to find space. So every single day, the hassle of Jubilee dealing with people who will be wanting ambassadorial appointments, cabinet secretaries, directorships,
chiefs.
The numbers are increasing by the day because there's nothing else that you'd be able to give these people. They are not coming with their own votes. It is not an elected leader coming to you saying, I have brought my constituents and myself to you. It is a person who is coming as an individual with possibly a handful of other people, if you can be sure of that. But what you need to do to deal with the perception, to continue to get these people from that community to feel that you embrace them, would be to give them some appointment. So the number of people that Jubilee has to cater for as they dish out the cake, so to speak, is increasing by the day. Whereas on NASA's side, it may be decreasing, but they have more of the wananchi, the ordinary wananchi, to be able to address. So their concern would be how will they ensure that the promises that they have made, that we will not budget for school fees the minute they come in. We know school fees is taken off the table. That the minute they come in, the price of food goes down. You know, they will have to be dealing with that as a headache.
All right, Martin.
My way of looking at Hassan Omar, Samuel, is for me, Hassan Omar, and not just Hassan Omar, the likes of Moses Akaranga, those guys who are John Mrutu. The question you need to ask yourself is, had they won, for example, had Hassan Omar won the Mombasa gubernatorial race under Wiper Party, will he still have done the same thing he has done? And my answer is straight no. So how do I interpret is crossing over to Jubilee? For me, Hassan Omar is just like a jilted lover. It's looking for some political solace. He's nursing wounds of losing an election, and is looking for some very immediate, and it's a normal process, by the way. You know, when you talk about, when you use an analogy like jilted love, and Samuel, I want to believe perhaps you have been in such a situation. You know the kind of...
What?
you know,
okay.
you know the kind of pain that comes with that kind of experience. And if you don't look for a therapist, for example, for those who have gone through, I'm not saying I've been, I just said...
Neither are you saying I have been.
Neither am I saying. But on a very serious note, I think the decision by Hassan Omar to cross over to Jubilee, not just him, but other host of losers, because there have been so many, from Kakamega to Kisumu to whichever, those who lost in the night say, listen, we are in Jubilee. One is good in creating perceptions. It's merely a perception issue. There's nothing they're bringing on the table. If anything, it's about them. It's about how do we survive outside. You know, you have been earning close to 1 million shillings monthly, and you're imagining that every month will be coming for the next 5 years, and you're in the political cold, no coin on your account. You can see. So it's good to look to cross over to this if you feel like they're going to win, so that in the event they appoint you the ambassador to Saudi Arabia, who knows, you may keep surviving with that 500,000 close to 1 million. So for me, it's a perception issue. It has nothing to do with numbers, because Hassan Omar is not going to bring any numbers for Jubilee in cost. Then the support they had in cost before the August 8th general election will most likely be the same, if not perhaps drop.
I'm also curious to see how Jubilee will handle reward for this.
Yes.
Because there are
Post
so many.
this entire, because there are too many.
If they win, it will be
and
interesting.
if they win, but we shall see. We shall be right here. We shall be right here, but also it appears that the most expensive bay to lose in Kenya is the political bay. How about we wind up this show at that note? Thank you, Millie Lwanga, for coming to the show.
Thank you.
Martin, your presence as an amicus, always appreciated.
Thank you very much
And
for
thank
allowing
you
that.
for watching the show this morning. That has been Eye on Politics. Dunstan Omari just texted me, passing his regards to the three of us, and saying that he's had an opportunity to watch the show, and it is amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for watching the show this morning. And to all of you who made Eye on Politics a reality this Monday, we get to do this again next Monday from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. But for now, I get to pave way for Safina Cheng to come up with a family check, which is coming to you immediately after people like us. My name is Njoroge. God bless you all.